Alright guys, welcome to RC Mojo. This week we need to get a truck ready for the Southern Scal Trail. So here we have an Element RC Enduro TrailRunner. It's a 1/10 crawler with independent front suspension, which I thought would be something different to try. New to me anyway, this truck has been on the market for a few years now. Plus the Enduro Ultron is out with the updated suspension. Also, this one's an RTR, which I'm not a huge fan of. But here we are. I'm recording the video you're currently watching on the 1st of September. I've got the evening to go from a stock trail runner to something a bit more capable in time for editing, so what you're watching is queued up ready to go live on Sunday. Right, as the truck's an older model and everyone and their mum has done an unboxing and stock review, we're going to skip most of that. I will say though, I do quite like the body. I think it'll end up on a different chassis with a gnarly bumper. Would be nice if it was a proper licensed shell, but still it's not bad. So just quickly, also in the box we have a perfectly usable 3-channel radio. It feels a bit plasticky, but it'll do the job of getting an RTR up and running. We have the bag with loads of decals and the instructions, but we'll keep those with the body for a future build. Then we have the big bag of accessories. There's a snorkel in there, a roof rack, gears for the setup of the under and overdrive, plus the axle housing and bits if you want to convert it back to a more traditional setup. Pretty neat. With the body off, we have a pretty traditional truck, at least on the rear 2/3. There's really nothing special going on at all. The gearbox is quite neat and very flexible. You can flip it round, fit an over or under drive, and it looks pretty tough too. The real magic is at the front with the independent suspension. They've been quite clever with the setup and it's all attached to the stock chassis. In fact, as a lot of you probably already know, you can get an IFS kit that has everything in it to convert a solid axle enduro. Right, let's have a look at the upgrades. First we have your generic 25 kg servo. This one's out of my spares box, so it's not ideal, but it should be quite a bit more torquey than the stock one. Apparently the stock one's only 12.5 kg, which isn't a lot. Next we have the power system. Stock is brushed with I think a 5-slot 550, which I'm sure is quite adequate, but I want a bit more oomph. So here we have a Hobbywing Fusion SE 1800 kV. It has the ESC built into the motor, so that's a bit less to do. Plus the motor should be a simple drop-in replacement. I'm also going to swap the radio for a FlySky GT3C. It's nicer to hold and a bit lighter. We'll also need a receiver to go along with it. The stock wheels are rather nice plastic 1.55s. They match up with the stock body nicely, but it's not really what we need for the SST. So here we have a set of Traxxas tyres on aluminium wheels. They're 1.9, so we're going to get a bit more ground clearance. For the battery, I'm going to use 2200 mAh 3S LiPos. It'll keep the weight down a bit, but still be more than up to running the Fusion SE. Which just leaves the body. I wanted something fairly narrow at the front to make clearing the front tyres a little easier, so we've got a Proline cliffhanger. Nothing too special, but it'll be quick and easy to paint and get mounted up. Right, first job, we're going to remove the stock wheels and put them on a shelf for another project. Next, at the back of the chassis, there's a funky exhaust hanging off the chassis. That's going to get in the way, so it needs to be removed. It's just 2 screws from the bottom. Next, the electronics, and there's a rather nice sealed receiver box on the side. So we need to remove the 4 screws, unplug the ESC and servo, and then pull out the receiver. It's stuck in with some servo tape, which thankfully is the nice kind that doesn't fall apart, so it's fairly easy to remove cleanly. The servo lead is attached to the chassis with a couple of zip ties, so they need snipping and the lead pulling through under the battery box. The ESC is attached with more servo tape, so we just need to unplug the motor and lever the ESC from the chassis. Next, I thought we'd ease into the build and just swap the servo, which should be simple, but it did show one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of RTRs quite nicely. The servo has 4 screws that we can get to from under the chassis. My plan was remove them, move the servo so we can access the servo arm and remove that, then wiggle the servo free and remove it from the chassis. Except there's just not enough space to get the servo out. I had a quick go at loosening a couple of the other bits to gain some extra clearance, but to no avail. I ended up removing the drive shaft from the front, which would have worked, but there's not quite enough movement in the shaft to remove it from the pinion shaft, so we also have to remove the gearbox. Not a huge problem in this case, as we're going to need to remove it anyway, but still quite annoying. The thing is, if I'd built this from a kit, I'd know exactly how to quickly remove the servo, so I wouldn't be guessing. Building a kit is a great way to get to know a truck. On the flip side, overall starting with an RTR should save a bit of time, which is what we're short of, and if this is the only niggle, we should be okay. Of course, I could have had a look at the manual, I think it has an assembly guide, but it would still need a little bit of exploratory part removal to work out what to do. With the stock servo out, we can offer up the new servo and reinstall the 4 screws. Centre it up with a servo tester and reattach the arm and its screw. And that's the servo upgraded. It's all working nicely. Alright, motor next. First the gear cover comes off with the 2 screws, then remove the 2 motor screws, which have been thread locked, so we need a bit of extra leverage to get them out. No problem though. Then we can remove the pinion and put the motor somewhere safe with the ESC. We'll need to work out what angle to mount the motor at so the leads don't get caught up in anything that moves. The motor has several sets of mounting holes, so we can get it just right. I think the best thing is to have the leads coming out of the top to steer them away from the drive shafts. So we offer up the motor, reinstall the 2 screws, add the pinion, set the gear mesh and reinstall the gear cover. Next the front drive shaft can go back on. Then we can reinstall the gearbox, remembering that when we slide the shafts back together, the joints need to be synchronized. Basically, the bits inside the joint should be at the same angle at both ends. This is all a bit of a faff to get everything lined up, so I just did it off camera. And lastly, we just need to reinstall the 4 gearbox screws. Next a quickie, and we don't need the tall rear body posts. They're just getting in the way. There's 2 screw pins that need to come out, then we just lift the posts from the chassis. Here we go, much neater. Now for the wheels, which of course just offer up and we reuse the wheel nuts. They're quite a bit bigger than the stock ones, but should clear the chassis just fine. I found the stock Traxxas tyres work fairly well down at the SST quarry, especially in the woods. These particular ones date back to the TRX4 launch, so they're pretty well worn in. They're on their 5th or 6th set of tyre foams. Okay, body now. Now I've given it a quick trim to get rid of the skirt so we can see how well it fits. And well, it doesn't look too far off. We'll need to adjust the body post height and fit the short rear body posts, but I think it's going to work. Now I'm not in competition, so we don't need to worry about all the rules with bumpers and all that kind of stuff. We just want the best approach angle we can get. I'm going to use a box up against the front of the cross member so we can set the body just behind it. Turns out the body is just the right length that the rear is just sitting on the rear cross member, so no extra overhang. Almost like it was planned and I didn't order everything in a bit of a rush. Now we can mark up where we need to drill the holes for the posts, drill them and see how it fits. And yeah, that's not bad, it's just sitting a bit high. And those rock sliders are sticking way out. The sliders are adjustable, but they're already set to the narrowest, so we're just going to remove them entirely. It would be nice to have the extra protection, but it'll do. Maybe in the future we can cut up some of the other parts and make them fit. Next we're going to need to trim the front of the body to clear the tyres at full lock. It's not too far off, but we will get bound up if we leave it as it is. I'm not trying to be super scale of course, so I'm going to be a bit vicious. We'll need to trim the arch at the rear and trim right up towards the headlights at the front, which leaves us with this. Now I'm not 100% happy with the cut line at the front, but it is functional. We might give it an extra trim once we get some paint on and we can see the shape better. Which brings us to the paint. Now I'm not going to do anything amazing, I'm going for speed with this one, so here we go, one painted body. We just need to peel off the overspray film, which is always the best bit. The shells always look so clean and shiny, at least for the first 10 minutes. Thankfully we've got some warmish weather, so the paint dries extremely quickly. The complete paint job probably took 45 minutes, and it's already handleable as long as we're careful. Next we'll add some decals, some of the Proline ones, plus some extra branding. I ordered a few of these decals a while ago, but I ended up with more than a few, so we might as well use some up. I think it all goes quite well with the white. Okay, battery tray next, at least a quick test. It's really designed for a shorty pack, so I'm not holding up much hope. And yeah, it would work, but the LiPo is sitting on the edge of the tray, which isn't ideal. We could hack it, but I think I'd rather design a new tray and just print one out. It's going to take a while to print, but I think it's going to be time well spent. Plus it'll give me some downtime to get some dinner. Okay, while the tray's printing and my dinner's cooking, I've given the electronics a quick test, which went well. So we can start tidying up the install. First, the servo lead needs a couple of zip ties to attach it to the chassis rail, so it's up out of the way. Then we can clean up the radio box and the bottom of the radio with some alcohol and stick it on with some servo tape. Then the lid goes back on, taking care not to pinch the O-ring seals. The power button can get stuck to the back of the box, where it should be out of the way, but still easy to get to with the body on. Okay, here we are some time later, after waiting for the printer to print the battery tray. We're now at 1 AM on Saturday morning, which is a bit later than I really wanted to be up, but we're nearly there. We just need the tray, one of the Velcro straps from the stock tray, and the 4 screws. Once attached, we can just slot a battery in, do up the strap, and we're more or less done. The battery lead on the motor is way too long, but I don't really want to cut it down just yet. I'll have to have a bit of a tinker during the week and see if I can get it out of the way. Probably something involving a few zip ties. That just leaves calibrating the ESC so we get full throttle, hook up a programming card and set the reverse power to 75% so it's a bit less jumpy. Give it a quick test. Okay, that's good. Pop the body on, and other than tidying up the battery lead, that's one truck ready for the SST. Not bad for a couple of hours work. I'd still like to build a kit version though, so maybe we'll see about building an Enduro, then adding an IFS2 kit. It would be a good comparison too. That's a way off though. This will be fine to do the job next week. Now, I'm only going to the SST on Sunday this time, as I've got something non-RC involving horses, dogs and donkeys on Saturday. Should still be fun, but I'm going to miss having the full weekend of RC. Right, as always then, thanks for watching, like if you like, subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment if there's something on your mind. Bye guys!